Welcome! I'm John Denor, and this is Goblin Points. As promised in the last interview episode, this episode is the continuation of the conversation Ashley and me had. The conversation was recorded at the end of June, so we don't know anything about the playtest packet yet. But we still had much to talk about. Again, I have to apologize for my microphone during the interview. It does a weird clipping thing and cuts off my words. I'll try to get that fixed for next time. Ashley sounds good though. Let's jump in.
I've also been sort of surprised sometimes by the way they would address feedback of things that were received poorly. Something that's I would have never thought of this solution to it, but it works. But also a lot of times it's this is a thing that I would have suggested if I was allowed to, and they came to the same conclusion, and I get to feel a little bit like a very special smart person. I knew it, I totally knew it. But,
It really cements the Max proverb of it's not the dumb thing you're thinking of, it's the cool thing I'm thinking of, where we want this in the game because we have a really cool idea, but we understand that we're not communicating it clearly enough yet. So kind of we need to get you on board with our cool thing.
Yeah. I think part of the idea of strictly disallowing suggestions is the fact that a lot of people who make suggestions have a different vision of what they want the game to be than the designers do. The suggestions they would make are not necessarily here's how you would make the game you're trying to make better. It's here's how you would be, what you should do to make your game more like the game I would want to make, kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
Which I feel that's unavoidable just in the idea of giving feedback and suggestions. Everybody has their own ideas of what makes a thing better or worse. I don't pretend that my feedback is completely objective and completely in sync with their vision.
Sure.
I clearly have my own ideas of how things should be done. I am a game developer, and in video games, it's different. It is different, and my community is a lot smaller than MCDM. When I was developing Petal Crash, I did get a lot of feedback that was here's a problem with the game, and then they would include here's my idea of how to fix it. It very rarely what they suggest to fix it is the thing to do.
Yeah.
But this is a problem is the extremely useful part of the feedback. I'll give an example, which if you haven't played Petal Crash, this is probably going to be a little hard to follow. I'll sort of explain it in broad strokes.
Sure.
Petal Crash is an arcade puzzle game that's sort of based around the idea of color matching. You slide tiles around, and if they color match, they fling other tiles around, and you can set it up in such a way that those matches will set off chain reactions of other matches.
Mm-hmm.
So a problem in the game was new blocks appear on the board as you make moves, but you can also just make them appear with a button. You can it's you know how, in Tetris, you could just hold down to, get the pieces to drop as quickly as possible just to get a bunch of stuff on your board or whatever? Yeah. There's a button in Petal Crash you can push that says, okay, instead of waiting to spawn the next wave of blocks, just make them now.
Uh-huh.
And the problem was that if you just did that over and over again and, filled your board most of the way full, then the blocks ended up clustered in such a way that it would just give you free chain reactions, basically.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it would just be the dominant strategy in the game, instead of learning how the pieces interact and setting up chains deliberately, it was mostly just about who could put the most blocks on their board and set them off the fastest. Higher level play was generally you do a little bit of adjustment of what the board gives you for free to make it a little better, but it's very much a lot of just throw the blocks in and then clear them out because they arrange themselves for you so much of the time.
Wow.
So the suggestion that was made to fix this was to add more colors of blocks so that there would be less chance of two of the adjacent blocks being next to each other in a way that would make it easy to do these accidental chains. I was resilient to that idea because it would make the game more complex and less accessible to have more colors to keep track of. Also, it would have been a little bit of a pain to implement because I already set it up in such a way that the way the colors were defined was not easily extensible.
Sure.
I could have done it. There's nothing that said I couldn't do it, but it would have been a bit of a pain. I ended up fixing that problem not by adding another color, but by changing the way that the blocks spawn in, like the patterns they spawn in. I made it to where when it placed a new like marker for this is where a block goes, it would avoid placing them next to other ones of the same color.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you grew in a whole board, the board would appear like, not with like a lot of clusters of color that could be easily cleared, but it would appear like completely scrambled. Just like a checkerboard of colors that is like impossible to work with if you just grow it in without any consideration towards how it's arranged. I was very proud of that because that change was like, it fixed the problem completely. Like that degenerate strategy of just growing everything and clearing it out like became no longer viable. And like the path to being better at the game was now actually engaging with its mechanics.
Right.
But it was also like an invisible change. It was like the patterns that the block spawned in before was already something that seemed random. And now it still did seem random, even though it was actually less random than before. Yeah, like random things often don't seem as random as they are. Like I think even Matt Colville talked about like people complaining that when they put their library on shuffle, sometimes it would play songs in order, and it's like, no, that's random. Sometimes they'll wind up in order. Like that's what randomness is. I had to go in and basically make it less random to seem more random.
Yeah.
There was an example of somebody complaining, lots of people complaining about a game, like some FPS, where it took way too long to reload. But what they did to fix it was they made the reloading animation like a lot more involved looking.
Oh, right.
So that like it actually looked like you were doing a lot of stuff, and people were like, okay, yeah, like nobody complained about the reload time anymore because like look at all this stuff you have to do to reload the thing. If you were playing a game like an older style game, let's say you had to reload it, it just took the gun off screen for like 2 seconds and put it back. You would probably think that was like glacial, but if it played like a 2-second long animation of your character like ejecting the magazine and grabbing the new one and jamming it in and pulling the levers and stuff, that like perception, like presentation is a huge part of design. I think the general thing we're hitting on is that the solution to problems in design is often very unexpected.
Yeah, definitely. I just remember, I think it was around when they switched from 2D6 to 2D10, and someone was suggesting why not just use a D20 at this point. And of course there is the probability curve and all that stuff that is actually part of the reason they don't want to use a D20. But someone just mentioned it feels better to roll 2 dice than one. And yeah, that's kind of true. when the dice go click and clack, it feels better. So yeah, 2D10 are kind of better just because of that.
I also think that like 2D10 is better because I think if it was 1D20, it would create a lot more association in the player's mind of like, I'm playing a D&D type game with a D20.
Yeah.
Like having it be 2D10 or 2D6 is very, I feel like really sets expectations of like, this is a different game that works differently. If you were just rolling a D20 and like adding 5, you would feel like, okay, then what's the target's AC would be your next thought. And it's like, oh, that's not a thing in this game.
Definitely. It's like whenever I see like 2D10 percentile dice, my mind immediately goes to Call of Cthulhu, because that's where I learned playing that kind of game where you roll percentile dice. So to me, that's all games that do that are Call of Cthulhu games in my head.
Yeah, you're rolling 2d10 and comparing on a chart like the MCDM RPG is Call of Cthulhu. It's like that joke that some people are making nowadays. It's like, oh, all platform games are either a Sonic or a Mario.
Right.
Like, like it's like all tabletop RPGs are D&D or Call of Cthulhu. Something I think speaks to the potential of the MCDM RPG, and something I'm so excited about, is I think it's probably going to be one of the most like thoroughly tested tabletop RPGs like ever. They test the shit out of this game. They have like this very robust, very like well developed community of testers.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of time like getting to run smoothly with volunteers and with like actual contractor testers who get like paid to do it. Sometimes it would be like whenever there's an idea that's been floated or whatever, something they want to try and I don't think it'll work, I can always just sit back and be like, well, they're going to test it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, it'll become immediately apparent.
Yeah.
Whatever they propose that I think might be a bad idea or might not work out, I don't have to worry about that making it into the game in a form where it doesn't work out, because they're going to test everything.
It's kind of crazy to me how poorly tested stuff in the TTRPG space is. I watched someone else talk about the crowdfunder, and they were kind of criticizing that nothing was ready. The game wasn't even developed yet, and they were already asking for money. Because the usual thing you do is you make the core system and you do a Kickstarter or whatever to get money for like the print run and the art and layout. And they weren't doing that, so you're doing like a crowdfunder the wrong way.
No, they're actually spending money on developing the game. They're hiring designers and testers.
What was so crazy to me is like they were talking about, well, they're not even inviting like the backers into to test the game. The backers are such a great source of testers, and watching how MCDM does it just made me think, oh my god, that's not going to be the case. And they of course these people criticizing whatever, they have no idea how MCDM's system even works. And to someone's credit, there was a comment on the YouTube video which said like to the effect of, you have no idea how MCDM tests their stuff, do you? Which didn't really help the discussion, but I was like, oh, thank you, someone said it.
Yeah. Something I think speaks to the credit of MCDM is that Matt Colville is not the lead designer on the MCDM RPG. I sort of get the impression that a lot of these new tabletop RPGs that are focused around like YouTube channels, like these YouTube channels are not necessarily popular because they have good ideas. You certainly need to have good ideas to have a successful YouTube channel, but you also need to be like very charismatic. You also need to be like good at building and managing community. You need to be good at promoting yourself. So a lot of the times the product is also sort of the person that it's centered around. And I mean, MCDM, obviously, like, the company has the guy's initials in it. Like, clearly it is built around... The company is built around this person's personality and their, like, community they've cultivated around the things they make. But is a professional game designer from, like, the 90s. He actually has, like, experience in how these products are made. And, like, the lead designer is not... It's not about Matt Colville and how clever he is.
No.
I suppose. It's about, like, this company that he's put together of, like, these talented designers that have this, like, shared... It's like a shared vision, not necessarily, as he would say, like, a big eco project. It's actually kind of blown my mind seeing this game, like, get developed. Because... So the first version of the game I played was before the power roll.
Yeah.
And... Even then, the first time I got into a playtest and I read all the rules, I was coming off of the designing the game videos as like being the thing I knew the most about. I like read all the rules and I asked like, I didn't see anything in here about like subtracting any of my attributes from the damage. And they were like, oh yeah, that's not in the game anymore. I was like, oh wow, this game is already really different than what I thought it was going to be. I feel very blessed that I've been able to see and play these really radically different versions of the game. It's been like fascinating to me as a designer because it's like it's shown me a different way things can be designed. Because like I always thought like, okay, the first thing you're gonna want to get down is like your core die mechanic, was what I would say. I feel like that's sort of the thing you want to get done first. But they started with like the idea of their class design as being the sort of thing they start with. And they, like, swapped out the dice mechanic from under it, like, several times. But there's always been the idea of, like, okay, you're a hero and you build up your resource and then you spend it on cool powers.
Yeah.
Like, that's a thing that's been very constant.
And even how we generate heroic resources has also changed multiple times through the development.
Yeah. The Shadow used to be... You used to have Doom, and you get it when people die. And then for a while, it got changed to Insight, and you would get it whenever anybody got a crit on anything.
Right.
And then they changed it again to its current form, where you get 1 Insight for using one of your signature attacks, but you get 3 if you have an edge on the roll, so like an advantage. And that's the current version. and I think that's the one they're going to stick with because it's the one that's been working, because the other ones all had other problems.
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty happy with that. I've played a Shadow a few times in a few different versions, and I think that's like the best feeling version of it. And like now that they got the heroes feeling the way they want,
yeah,
now they're like completely re-examining their idea of how monsters work.
That is really interesting to me.
Yeah, they've been really like messing with it.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing currently, I don't know. They had this idea of like what they call squinions.
Yeah.
Which are like squads of minions. Like, cause they brought back minions from 4th edition in a new form in Flea Mortals. And sort of made the 5th edition of minions. For a lot of versions of the game earlier, they basically just kind of reused their minion rules from Flea Mortals in the MCDM RPG. But then they started quickly finding out that, like, oh, this game is very different. So the way minions work has to also be very different. And they tried, like, lots of different things with minions that never quite worked. But then they finally landed on, like, a version of it that does work. Like, the Flea Mortals minions are, like... The way they work is that if they get hit by something, they just die. If they fail a save against damage, they just die. If they get damaged past a certain threshold by anything, they just die. But otherwise, they don't die. So you don't have to track their hit points at all. And then they had this separate mechanic of overkill attacks, where if you do a whole bunch of damage to one minion, and then the leftover damage is enough to kill another minion, then you could like carry it over to another minion of the same stat block to like cleave through a bunch of them. That didn't work very well in the MCDM RPG because the assumptions of how you attack are different. Like, you're always hitting. There's no hit or miss. So, do minions just automatically die when you target them with something? So then they were too easy to, like, kill. But then they, like, changed it to where you had to damage them, like, past a certain threshold, or otherwise they wouldn't. Or then minions, like, became too hard to kill. Stuff like that. And then also, they, like, had overkill attacks, but then they got rid of overkill attacks. As of the last time I played, the way they did minions worked very well. And that is that minions shared a health pool.
Right, yeah.
And that, like, as the pool whittled down, minions would, like, get taken out. And if you're attacking a minion, the minion that gets taken out is the one you attack. If you, like, take out more than one, you can, like, pick another one to kill and then describe it like, oh, I kicked this goblin and this goblin flew into this other goblin. And you just kind of like it to describe narratively how you take out two at once. Area attacks were very effective against minions, but not, like, just an auto minion clearing button. Like, if you catch, like, say 5 minion goblins in an area attack that deals 5 damage to everybody in the area, their minion pool would take 5 damage for every goblin that got hit. So if you hit 5 goblins with the 5 area attack, the minion pool takes 25 damage, which probably is going to take out, like, most of them.
Right.
But it wasn't guaranteed to. It would probably just take out, like, half of them, maybe, if you rolled, like, really bad on your power roll and these minions were, like, a little beefier. It wouldn't just automatically kill all of them.
Right.
But area attacks were still very effective against minions. But also single target attacks could also be effective against minions because of this, like, sort of reframing of the old overkill rule to be just, like, you're just damaging this minion's health pool. As of now, I think the way it works, they've sort of taken that idea and expanding it to more than just minions, I think.
It sounds like it, yeah. Or at least it looks like they're making minions more common, I feel like. Where it's more expected to use more minions.
They've talked about, like, having, for certain kinds of encounters, like, having each sort of main enemy be accompanied by, like, a little minion squad. And that if you attacked them, they could, like, divert some of the attacks to their minions. It's been very interesting to see these ideas evolve.
I find this focus on kind of reimagining how monsters work to be 99.9% of the time I'm the GM when I play. I very rarely play as a player. This reimagining of the monsters is, to me, the most interesting part. Because not only is it getting like a reimagining from the bottom up as the rest of the game gets, it's something that monsters feel the same across so many RPGs more than anything else. And then just thinking, how about we don't just list the statistics of a monster in like a stat block and just give it to you just like that and with no other preparation. But just the thought of the encounter sheet and kind of rethinking how does a GM run this game at all? That's so interesting to me as a mostly GM, and just the fact that they're actually trying to go back and just start again and say, okay, what is the GM actually doing at the table?
All of these like re-examinations of like core assumptions and such, like from first principles, it's been like very exciting to watch.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they are explicitly making something that is not D&D, but is sort of in the same genre. And to see like what sort of else is possible if you like discard completely like the entire legacy of the game that it sort of needs to carry forward. But that like D&D needs to carry forward in order to be recognizable as D&D.
Yeah.
Like if you can free yourself from that legacy and start over, like what can you make? Something I'm very excited to see pan out.
Yeah, me too. Incredibly so. Can you tell us a bit about what you've been working on recently? Maybe something you've released recently, or just what's occupying your creative urges at the moment?
I've been working on Petal Crash 2, the Petal Crash sequel.
Ah.
A lot of my focus on the work lately has been a lot of managing the crowdfund and a lot of delegating and directing, and not a lot of working on the game directly myself, which is a very strange experience for me, because, like I said when I introduced myself, I'm more of a solo creator typically. I'm more of a kind of do most of everything myself. And Petal Crash 2 is the first time I'm doing a project where that's kind of not the case.
Oh.
This time around I've got a lead programmer, that's my friend Jill, and she's the one who's actually like building the game. And then I've got more help with the art assets. I have somebody else doing the music, which I always have somebody else doing the music because I can't do music, but a lot of my work has been very producery lately, of like directing people to make assets for the game, fulfilling the backer rewards and shipping them out, like getting them manufactured, making sure all the money goes where it needs to go. I've only just finished sending out the vast majority of the backer rewards, so I'm only like just now getting back into actually working on the game itself. The way we had the crowdfund set up is that if you backed a certain amount, you would get to like play an earlier version of the game before it like becomes publicly available. So our focus is right now going to be on getting that early version of the game ready, which means that the game needs like an actual user interface. The game needs to save your high score instead of just showing the high score as being 42069 all the time. Like there's a lot of stuff in the game that is already working in a way that looks and feels complete. But then there's also a lot of stuff in the game that is like very obviously not done. So when you're cutting a trailer together, you can show the stuff that's done and not show the incomplete stuff. But when people actually get their hands on it, it needs to feel a bit more complete.
Yeah.
For people who listen to this kind of podcast, there's actually something else that I made a while ago with my friend Zach that is D&D related, which is... So me and my friend Zach play D&D together, and we're both like homebrew sickos who are always like sending homebrew stuff to each other. So we actually collaborated on a little supplement that has like a new subclass for every core class in 5th edition. And each one is also accompanied by like artwork and by like a little bit of fiction that's like told from the perspective of like the little fairy character that is like narrating the whole thing. The sort of framing device of the supplement is that this little fairy has been like going around documenting all the cool heroes they've met. Throughout the book, there's like little sketches of this fairy character like imitating all the different heroes and all the different subclasses that are introduced. And then Zach wrote like little bits of fiction that are like extremely funny, like this little gormless fairy fawning over all these cool heroes. The supplement is called Lyrics Ledger of Legends.
Oh, I like the art.
Zach also... Oh, thank you. Me and Zach both did art for it, and Zach did like the characterful writing, and I did all the sketches of the little fairy. We both designed the subclasses that are in there. I would like to go back and like, once the 2024 rules of 5th edition are out, I personally would like to go back and revisit some of these ideas and see if we can refine them a little bit, and make them more in line with like the new design from the new edition. But I am still pretty proud of this. I designed the rogue subclass in there, which is called the Lucky Fool Rogue, which is all about being not just lucky, but specifically lucky in a way that is sort of like witless and very much like you have no control over it and better things just happen to you because you're lucky. And like you'll like obliviously avoid danger and things like that.
Ah, nice.
They basically get their own version of a legendary resistance where they can automatically pass a saving throw, but then they suffer some like random comical blunder. So like, oh, I dodged the dragon breath because I tripped on my shoelaces kind of thing.
Nice.
I'm also very proud of my paladin subclass, which is a Oath of Inquisition paladin. It's a very like grim and subterfuge focused paladin with like a lot of they have a lot of abilities that are like meant to be useful against like magical creatures and magic users, but are kind of generally also useful. For example, their aura gives them blind sight and also gives anyone near them blind sight.
Oh.
So if you're going up against like a mage who goes invisible, you can get up close to them and you can see them and you can grab them, and then if your friends go up there, they can also still see them. So
nice.
There's a lot of abilities that are very like useful for hunting down magic users who are obviously all heretics. They also have one of their channel divinity options, Hushed Tones, where they basically give themselves an aura of silence that's around them, that moves with them. So they can use that to sneak around, or if they go up against a magic user and they turn that on and like go up next to them, it like keeps them from casting spells with verbal components because it works like the silent spell.
Oh, I really like that.
Thank you. I was very proud of that one.
Yeah, that's really good. And it also solves the in-joke in my regular group where whenever they try to sneak somewhere, there's always a paladin with a heavy armor that has disadvantage on stealth. And they all go tiptoeing, and in the back comes the paladin with clunk, 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 clunk.
Yeah. So this ability was like specifically to address that.
Yes.
Of like... You don't, like, put on light armor and sneak, you just become magically quiet. So you're just clunking around in heavy armor, but quiet. Zach also made a whole bunch of really cool ones. I really like their Sphinx Patron Warlock. You can trap somebody in, like, one of their abilities is they can banish you to, like, a pocket dimension called, like, the Tomb of Trials or something like that. And you pick a skill... and they have to succeed on a test of that skill in order to escape.
Oh, nice.
So you like banish them to the puzzle dimension and like force them to do a trial to get back. I think it's very flavorful and fun.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations? Something you enjoy, or something that inspires you, or something that just other people should know about? It can be anything like a movie, music, YouTube channel, or some other published media.
Okay, so here's the big thing that everybody should read. It is a Japanese comic series, a manga. It is called Hakume and Mikochi, subtitled Tiny Little Life in the Woods. Hakume Mikochi is a sort of fantastical slice of life story, sort of along the lines of like various other media that's about like little creatures living in the woods in harmony and such, but it's a lot more grounded and sort of more mature. It's like the main characters are adults, they have jobs, they like go drinking. There's a whole chapter about one character, like how her smoking pipe works. There's like so it's like, it's not really a sort of sickeningly cute twee kind of thing. It's a very like grounded slice of life story. It starts out with a lot of like supernatural elements, but those kind of quickly fade into the background. It just becomes more about like the daily lives of these characters in this world. They have jobs, they do various crafts, they have like animal friends who also have jobs. And a lot of times it's just very interesting stuff that's just like, oh, this is how people used to craft things back before, like, the Industrial Revolution and stuff. Like, a lot of very, like, just interesting things about how life was back in those days. But then a lot of it is also informed, like, this is how it specifically works in this world, and, like, this is how it works because these people are so small. Like, a daikon radish is, like, something that you have to like essentially get a semi-truck to haul through the street because it's like so huge compared to them.
Right.
There's just like a lot of really cool world building kind of stuff in it. A lot of very fun characters in it. It's a very interesting and cozy kind of slice of life story that I really enjoy, and I think a lot of people should give it a chance. They're up to 11 volumes now in the US. Wow. It's been running for about 10 years. If you like the idea of like a fantasy story that's focused around like, not around like heroes and monsters and stuff, but just around like daily life in a fantasy world, which is something that I think is getting more popular lately. I think it is something that you should check out.
Cool.
And by you, I mean everybody in the world.
Gonna find the link for this and include that in the show notes so that people can easily find it.
Thank you.
Finally, where can people find you and your creations?
For Petal Crash, you can type the words Petal Crash into your favorite search engine, and you will find it. I will also just link to it here on Steam. It's also on Nintendo Switch, if you like Nintendo Switch more. From there, you can find the backer kit page for Petal Crash 2. It's already finished, but there's still like a lot of stuff in there if you want to see how the game's coming along. My Twitter page, I am at Fluttersprites on Twitter, and on most other social media, I have that name. So if you find a Flutter Sprite on a place, that's usually me. I've got my own Discord server for Petal Crash. If you play Petal Crash and you like it and you want to play it with other people, that's where you find them. The PC version of Petal Crash has an online client, Petal Crash Online, that is actually a completely different game. We had to like basically remake the game from the ground up just to get it to support online play. So Petal Crash comes with this other game called Petal Crash Online that lets you play it with other people. And that is actually free now.
Oh,
so
wow.
You don't even have to have Petal Crash anymore to play Petal Crash Online. If you have somebody else you want to like try the game with, then you can just both get this client and try it out. It doesn't have like tutorials and stuff on how to play it, so you might want to go on YouTube and watch somebody else watch the tutorial from the base game.
Or just buy the base game.
Yeah, or you could buy the base game. That would help me out. Yeah, but that's where to find me.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me on Goblin Points, Ashley. And it was a treat to have you. It was really great.
Oh, thank you. Maybe when the MCDM RPG is out, we can have another one and talk about our thoughts about the finished thing.
Yes. I'd like that very much.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. And have a great day, I guess.
You too.
Thanks again to Ashley for coming on. It was a blast having you. Everything that was mentioned is linked in the show notes and on goblinpoints.com. If you want to be on next time, do not hesitate to send me an email at tips@goblinpoints.com. Until next time, snakkes.